Essential Instructional Practice 9 is ongoing observation and assessment of children's language and literacy development that informs instruction. Now you can see on the screen here the Australian curriculum, because it's the observation and assessment in conjunction with knowing what it is that we need to teach. So you need to make sure that you're looking closely at the Australian Curriculum English and the standards, and also the literacy progressions. These documents give you a lot of information as to the scope of learning that students need to have access to. So please ensure that you're using these documents to inform your planning. To match instruction to students' strengths and needs requires ongoing inquiry and observation and data collection. It doesn't mean more testing, but daily processes of gathering, documenting and analysing student work. Consider what evidence might you need to collect to know your students and differentiate instruction without difference becoming a deficit. For example, you might use annotated writing samples, reading or writing surveys or interviews, and we'll look more at those in a moment. Instruction is powerful only when it is sufficiently precise and focused to build directly on what students already know and to take them to the next level. The most critical aspect of design is focus, and this is determined from our ongoing observation and assessment. So the essential practices remind us that we need to prioritise observation during actual reading and writing. One-on-one reading conferences are necessary for checking all aspects of reading, such as fluency, vocabulary and comprehension. So you can see here the workshop model image again that we talked about previously in the Essential Practice 3 for small group and individual instruction, and also mentioned again in Essential Practice 6. All forms of observation and assessment work best when they're embedded in a recurrent structure, one that we and the students can anticipate as part of our daily teaching and learning. We cannot know whether students have mastered a learning target without giving them an opportunity to practice and respond. So this workshop model is a great one to explore. When students have the predictability of a daily reading or writing workshop, they know they'll have the opportunity to practice and to get the support they need. This structure also allows us to differentiate our instruction for every student. So in the workshop approach to literacy instruction, we provide whole group instruction in a mini lesson, and the learning intention is clearly articulated, and students have the opportunity to independently apply that learning intention while you as the teacher are working with your small group or individuals based on their identified needs. So this is providing an excellent structure for us to be able to prioritise this observation during actual reading and writing. It's during the reading workshop that you're able to listen to students read and to make notes about the reading behaviours that you notice. You need to carefully consider how you record what you notice so it can be used to inform instruction. And you can see there on the slide, teachers taking running records. But when you take a running record, you must always think about what are the reading behaviours that are demonstrated during this process of reading. And in the screen there is an example of a spectrum of reading behaviours taken from the work of Stephanie Harvey and Anne Ward. The other diagram there is the Venn diagrams, and what we suggest is that to help with differentiations ready for Essential Practice 3, if you put the children, use these Venn diagrams to put the children who have not reached the benchmark that you're looking for on the left-hand side, in the middle of the children who are around the benchmark that you're looking for, and on the right-hand side of the children who have exceeded that benchmark. But importantly, underneath you'll see a little table and it says next steps. So for each of those groups, once you've identified their reading behaviours, then you can plan what appropriate learning for those small groups, which will help you to be fulfilling Essential Practice 3. I've provided in the handout an individual conference note idea. This is to get you started on thinking about how you might record what you're hearing or what you're noticing when you're listening to children read. But monitoring learning also helps us to decide which students we'll confer with. So here you see a teacher conferring with a student around their writing. Conferring is as much about information gathering as it is about instruction. When you confer, you're actively gathering information about how students are reading or writing and what they need to grow as a reader or a writer. For example, when you see a writer engaging in helpful writing behaviour, such as maybe a great description or appropriate sentence structure or a well-organised paragraph, you point that out to them. Tell them what they're doing, what you see them doing, and name it for them. And this will help them know what to repeat in the future. Add the ideas to some skills I can use in your writing folder, you might say. So I saw you draw a line through a word and inserted a new thinking. You could add this idea to your writing folder or make a related goal. So once again, how are you keeping some documentation about the conversations you have with students around their writing? Because taking notes to keep to inform your conversations is a really important part of preparing for the next conference, because you might find a cluster of learners to place together in a small group. And you either reteach understanding that have been explored in the mini lesson or teach writing strategies and processes that will advance the writer. So a conferring conversation documentation is important. Ask them, as you bring children to you for conferring, tell me about your writing. What did you hope to work on? Encourage writers to come to the conference with a question. At the beginning of the year, you might ask, what's one thing that I should know about you as a reader or writer? It's not too late to ask that question now. Coming to understand where students are at in their writing really requires you to work as a team to learn about how to do some writing analysis. We've been working with your literacy coaches and leaders in your schools in this area, and there are other resources that the team can provide to you if this is an area that you would like to look at more closely. Because analysing individual student writing helps to target individual needs as well as possible whole school focus areas. Use the writing elements outlined in the NAPLAN marking guide to support you to know what to look for. Talk with your team about elements that you might not be sure about. And as you have heard in Essential Practice 6, explicitly teaching the craft of writing is important. So therefore, maybe writing analysis might be a next step for you. Those of you working in the early years will be interested in the work of Noella Mackenzie and her team from Charles Sturt University, where they've analysed thousands of examples of Year 1 writing and developed this writing analysis grid that you can see on the screen. This grid is available online as a PDF or as an interactive website where you can click into any one of those cells and actually have and get an example of the writing that it describes. As teachers, we need to use this information from formative assessment to inform our specific instructional targets, as we've talked about before. So this is going to involve finding out about specific letter sound relationships, as we talked about, relating very much to Essential Practice 5 and Essential Practice 4, assessing knowledge of specific vocabulary words, which will help you with Essential Practice 7, and our reading and writing strategies that are used and not used, which you will have heard about in many of the other essential practices. I bring to you again this wonderful author, Brian Kissel, and his book, Writers Drive the Workshop. We mentioned it in Essential Practice 6. He talks here about the power of seeking student voice and through author's chair, conferring, and reflective conversations. So I encourage you to take a look. There is a reading that is in Essential Practice 6 that you might like to go back and have another look at. Author's chair, just very quickly, is slightly different, as I mentioned in Essential Practice 6, slightly different to just having the author come and sit and share their work. Here, in his idea of the author's chair, it's the author's choices at the chair. How should the audience respond? So the child decides whether they would like a compliment or a connection, or they'd like someone to share a memorable line after they've read their work, or they might come with a question that they want others to help them with, or suggestions, or even ideas such as, I need help coming up with an idea, I'm not sure where to go to next. So you might want to work with your learners around how you can help them to actually come to to the conference with these ideas. And this would work very well in the online environment where students are able to respond to each other or to ask you questions that fit into perhaps some of these areas outlined on the screen. We've talked just briefly about the importance of your observation assessments during actual reading and writing. And this refers as well to providing your explicit feedback. It needs to be related to the student's reading and writing development and happens best at the point of in a conversation around a piece of a reading event or a piece of writing. You can see here a teacher using the Google App platform to provide some feedback, highlighting the actual words in the text and then making a comment. In this online environment, you're going to find this a very useful tool to actually support you to implement Essential Practice 9. Essential Practice 9 informs the work that we do in Essential Practice 3 in the name of small group and flexible small groups and individual instruction. And we should use the data that we gather to identify students who are struggling with reading and writing and to design intensive systematic instruction that focuses on their identified needs. So these two practices are interactive and overlap. One cannot exist without the other, Practice 3 and Practice 9. So I ask you now to take a moment to go to your audit tool, consider what you might need to learn more about, what's working well perhaps in your assessment and feedback processes at the moment. How is what you're noticing about student learning informing your next steps in the teaching that you do? So take a moment to make some notes in your audit tool.